This presentation looks at claiming universal credit. The important thing to realise is that universal credit is being rolled out gradually across the United Kingdom. Ultimately, everyone will be asked to move from the old benefits, which are called the legacy benefits, onto universal credit. The process of transferring people from the old benefits to the new benefits won't start until 2019. So currently then, universal credit is available for and is affecting new claimants. So if you are already claiming the legacy benefits, which could be job seekers allowance, tax credits, unless you have a change of circumstances and your claim gets closed or you need to make an additional claim, you'll be able to continue on the legacy benefits until that transition process starts. You can check whether your area is affected by universal credit yet by looking online at universalcreditinfo.net. In areas where universal credit is at full service rollout, somebody cannot start a new claim to one of the old legacy benefits that have now been replaced by universal credit. Therefore, a change of circumstances that would otherwise have triggered a new claim to one of those benefits would mean a switch to universal credit. So some examples of these changes could be if a couple had their first child. On the old benefit system, they would have needed to claim child tax credit to help them with that child, whereas that change would trigger a switch to universal credit. When somebody switches onto universal credit, any old legacy benefits become defunct and all of those benefits get replaced by universal credit. So for example, if a couple had their first child and needed to claim universal credit in place of child tax credit, their job seekers allowance claim would also cease, their housing benefit claim for help with their rent would also cease, and instead they would receive one monthly payment for that full household and their housing costs in the form of universal credit. So when universal credit is at its full service and has been rolled out in an area, a lot of the previous benefits then become unavailable. There are some exceptions, however, as not everybody would be able to claim universal credit. The key three people who would not be able to claim universal credit at the moment, even in a full service area, would number one, be families where there's 3 or more children. So at the moment, people in this category are not able to claim universal credit until January 2019. So in that circumstance, a family with 3 or more children would be able to start a new claim to one of the old legacy benefits, such as job seekers allowance, income support, or child tax credits, even if they don't have an existing claim. Also, tenants who live in supported accommodation are exempt from universal credit. So that means in that situation, they would be able to claim housing benefit from the local authority if they live in supported accommodation, which could be a registered care home, it could be support for those with learning disabilities. So in accommodation where support is being provided and the council recognises that as exempt accommodation, that individual would be able to claim housing benefit from the council. They could also claim universal credit as income replacement as well if they needed to. So it's possible in that situation to have 2 different benefit claims side by side. The third category is those who are of pension age. So if somebody has hit state pension age, they would be able to claim their state pension and possibly pension credit and housing benefit. Universal credit only affects those of working age. So if you fall into that category, you will not need to claim universal credit and you would be able to start a new claim to any of the pensionable benefits. So how to actually start a claim to universal credit? Universal credit is dealt with online. So you can start a new claim by going to the gov.uk website. The address is there available for you. It's possible if you don't have use of a computer or access to the internet at home that you'll be able to do so at the job centre, at your public library, or some local councils also have computers available for use. So the web address is www.gov.uk/apply-universal-credit. It is possible in some areas that you may be able to get assistance to start a claim if you have difficulties with using the internet, using computers, perhaps if English is not your first language. There's often a staff member who could be made available at your local job centre to assist you with that. So if you do have concerns, do make those known to the local job centre staff. In addition to the online service, there is a telephone line. So if you have complex needs that would stop you from claiming online, it may be possible that you could go through the claim process over the telephone. It's important that you would need to explain what the nature of your needs are, why you may have some vulnerable circumstances that mean you're not able to do so online with the support of staff that have been made available. So the telephone number for you is 0800 328 5644, or do check the gov.uk website if that changes. So alternatively, as I say, many councils have received funding to be able to support people to start their claims for universal credit. And the important thing to recognise is that if you are claiming universal credit as a couple, both members of the couple will need to start their claim online and set themselves up on the universal credit system, and then it will prompt you to join your claims together. So one of you will need to register, get a code which the other one can then apply. So it is very, very important if you're living together as a couple, you will need to claim universal credit together as a couple, and you will need to both set yourselves up online. So the amounts that you would expect to be paid on universal credit really depends on your household circumstances. So universal credit is made up of a number of different elements, and the elements that are applicable will depend on the particular household. So your first element will consist of either a single person or a couple allowance, and that also depends on the age. So the amount that's payable for the person who's claiming or for the couple would increase if somebody is aged 25 or over, and within a couple, if one or both of you are aged 25 or over, then your allowance would increase. Secondly, you would get an element in your universal credit if you've declared that you've got housing costs to pay. And you've evidenced that. So that would include rent that's payable, eligible service charges that are payable as well. Your housing costs would be affected by things like spare rooms. So if you live in a social rented accommodation, so if you're renting from a local authority or from your housing association, you'll be affected by the bedroom tax or spare room subsidy if you've got a room or more that's spare in your household. So thirdly, an element is included in a claim if there's children in the household. And that can also include an additional disabled child element if there's a child who's in receipt of DLA within the household. Fourthly or fifthly, there's also an element that's made available for somebody if they have been determined not to be fit for work because of health, disability, sickness of some kind. So if you are unable to work because of illness, you will need to provide what's called a fit note. So that's a note from your GP to state that you're unable to work and to state the reason why. And you will need to declare that on your Universal Credit Journal, and you'll also need to supply that fit note to the DWP. So if that's the case, and if you have been signed off by your GP for an extended period of time, so 2 to 3 months or more, then that will prompt you to go through a health assessment process as part of your claim, which will include a questionnaire and in due course a face-to-face health assessment. So an extra element would be included if someone had been through that process and it had been determined by the DWP that they don't have the capability to work at that time. There's also an element made available if somebody has caring responsibilities. So if somebody is in receipt of carer's allowance, they're caring full time, then they should receive a carer's element in recognition of that in their universal credit claim. And lastly, the other key area to be aware of is that childcare costs can be reclaimed through universal credit. 85% of the cost of what's paid for within certain boundaries can be reclaimed through universal credit, provided that it's provided by a registered childcare provider. So the key thing to remember if you are looking to reclaim your childcare costs is to declare those costs as soon as possible. So as soon as you get your invoice, pay it straight away and then declare that through your journal. And if needs be, supply the invoice and proof of payment to the job centre, if needs be as well, to evidence that. You must ensure that you do that on time because you may otherwise not get reimbursed for those costs if it falls outside the current assessment period. So once those elements are then added together, it could be that there's deductions made from those amounts for other income coming into the household. So the most common example would be earnings. So where somebody has wages coming in, their wages that's net of any tax that they've paid, any national insurance that's paid, some of that would get deducted from a universal credit total amount that would be payable. If the household has pension income, that would also get deducted from the universal credit, and certain other benefits as well. Not all benefits, but there are some are exempt. Disability benefits such as DLA, such as personal independence payment, they're exempt. They wouldn't affect the universal credit claim, but some other benefits would. And also, if there's any adults in the household, additional adults who are aged 21 or over. So the most common example of that would be grown-up children. So where children have grown up, they still remain in the household. Once they turn 21 or over, a deduction is made from the housing cost for that individual. And in addition to those things, deductions may be made if there's debt repayments in place. This could be for priority debts such as rent arrears, council tax, utility bills. It could be if there's been overpayments in the past of any legacy benefits such as housing benefit, such as tax credits, income support. There could be deductions made from someone's allowance of universal credit to repay those debts. And very lastly, the other thing that could affect the amount that you are paid in your universal credit is sanctions. Sanctions are essentially a financial punishment for failing to do something that was deemed to be a reasonable expectation for you as a claimant of universal credit to do. So the most common example would be failing to attend an appointment at the job centre, failing to apply for a job, failing to go to a job interview that you were instructed to do so. So sanctions can affect the amount of universal credit paid, and they can actually be quite ongoing and of a considerable amount as well. So that's something to watch out for. I would say when you're looking to claim your universal credit, the important thing is to make sure that what you're signing up to do is reasonable, that you can commit to what you're saying you will do. So, for example, if you have caring responsibilities, if you have a young child in your household, or if you care for an elderly relative, for example, make sure that when you're claiming your universal credit, you declare that, because otherwise the expectation will be on you to be looking for full-time work. If that's not possible for you, you need to declare the reasons why, because otherwise sanctions is something that you might be affected by. This is an example of a universal credit award that provides an illustration of some of the things that we've been talking about. Now, this breakdown of the universal credit amounts is available on the Universal Credit Journal. The important thing to realise is that as universal credit is online, if you've claimed online, then all the information relating to your claim will be online. You will not receive any letters through the post regarding your universal credit. You won't receive this information in writing. Instead, it will be available on your journal a few days before your payment is scheduled. So to drill down into this in more detail, you can see that at the top it states the total payment that's made for that month. So these claimants received an allowance of £1,193 in their universal credit for the month. That was paid to them on the 15th of December. The next line below shows us what period that payment relates to. So it relates to this household's circumstances between the 9th of November and the 8th of December. So for that one calendar month, the below is worked out based on their circumstances. So first of all, we can see there's an element for the standard allowance. In this case, this person is claiming as a single person. They're not part of a couple, but they are aged over 25, so they're getting allowance for themselves as a single person. Secondly, they've declared and shown evidence of their housing costs, so they have a housing element included in their claim. So you can see, though, that in this case, the housing element that is being included is £611.03. However, what they've declared of the housing costs is a total rent of £782.90 and service charges of £9.06. So the actual rent is more than what they're receiving in the universal credit. So the most common reason for that is if they've got a spare room that's not occupied, or if they've got another adult in the household aged 21 and above, a deduction is made for their contribution to that cost. Thirdly, in this case, the household has 2 children, so an element is being made available for the cost of 2 children. And this person has also declared that they have childcare costs. They would have evidenced that in the form of an invoice and shown that they've made that payment by showing bank statements for that as well. So they have an element included in their claim for childcare. So the total amount before any adjustments of their universal credit would be £1,606.28. In this case, the claimant is also working, so there's some deduction being made for payments that they've received in wages. So their payment from employment was £645, and so an amount of £285.76 has been taken off their universal credit. Over on the right-hand side, we can see that this claimant also took an advance payment. So that means they took a loan from the DWP to help them cover their costs before their first payment of universal credit was received. And they're paying that back at £63.88. So there's a deduction made for that advance. And lastly, this illustrates the effect of debt repayments as well on a universal credit claim. So here there's 2 different debts that are getting repaid. One is to repay tax credits where they've been overpaid, and lastly, housing benefit recovery is also in place. So an overpayment of housing benefit has occurred in the past previously as well. So with those deductions for wages, for advance loan, and for the debts, it leaves a total payment for the month of £1,193.39.